It's a busy time of year.
We're all busy.
Well, it's unusual, you know, because it's a career that has a beginning and an end, or a job. It's different than the guy that shows up every day.
It's 5:30, so we'll worry about it after.
Okay, let's worry about it after. We're gonna start. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Should we do the, well, we're gonna do non-public. We're gonna go into non-public because for RSA 91A3:C. Sorry, this includes matters which if discussed in public would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of this board. RSA 91A3I, this includes matters relating to the preparation for and the carrying out of emergency functions. Will you pull the board?
So moved. Second. Ms. Merrill?
Yes.
Mr. Billings?
Yes.
I'm yes. Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Lodge?
Yes.
Mr. Porter Zucker?
Yes.
Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Okay, stand for the pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Looks like the whole board is here,
Yeah.
and we're gonna open public comments at 6:09. On the agenda, student recognition, New Hampshire Scholar Athlete.
Are all our scholar athletes out and about?
There are games.
Originally, we chose this no game being scheduled for today, but last week with all of that rain, a lot of our teams have
Okay.
rescheduled.
So
Can we do this next?
Emily Waldron, is the one that said she was gonna try to get here after a game. And I talked to a few of them at the tennis match that were there as spectators and they weren't planning on coming, so
Okay, so
I don't,
maybe what we could just do is at least say what New Hampshire Scholars athletes are, because I think, and how many we had, and then we'll share the certificates with Sarah to distribute.
That'd be great.
So Scholar Athletes is put on by the New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association as well as the Athletic Director Association. And the qualifications, students have to be a multi-sport athlete, they have to participate in community service, and they have to have above a 3.5 grade point average. And we had 12 individuals, 12 seniors, they also have to be a senior. We had 12 seniors this year that met all of those qualifications, and they were presented with certificates and up at the Capitol Center in Concord, and it was a really nice event, so.
So it's quite a moment of pride and quite an accomplishment. So we will get the certificates to you to distribute.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we're missing Paulo for the student
I'm assuming
board.
Paulo has
He's at the
an
game.
after-school activity as well, so.
Okay,
we
we'll skip that for now. Minutes, April 11th, regular school board meeting minutes. Mrs. Moriarty, attachment 1.
So motion. Second.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is this the one where I chose my? Is this one where we chose the committees? Yes.
Yeah,
Because I noticed that there was an error. I was listed for the safety committee member, but I
oh,
I
no,
only.
I think we, did we,
I think you were on the sick bank.
you know what, we corrected that on the website.
Okay, I saw it on the
And we didn't correct
website.
it on
All right.
here, then.
Okay,
Right.
we'll
Make that
Thank
adjustment.
you. Thank you.
we'll fix that right away.
Because I'm just the Hewitt Tech and the right, yeah. That one.
Okay. All right, so we'll fix, can we accept the minutes with that one correction?
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion?
We made the motion in a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So that's the 11th. April 21st, special school board meeting minutes.
A motion to approve the minutes of April 21st.
Second.
Any corrections to that one?
On page 4, under announcements, the Tuesday, May 23rd, room is an M added to it.
Typo.
We have that.
Okay. Anything else? All those in favor with that correction of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Current bills payable. General operating expenses, attachment 3, manifest 3034. Is there any questions? Can I have a motion then to pay the bills?
So moved.
Was there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, new business. NH, New Hampshire and Federal Accountability Overview.
I'd like to turn things over to Mrs. Papalardo, and I know that Ms. Otten will also be jumping in at some points too. We wanted to take some time so that you are aware of what the federal accountability and New Hampshire state accountability system requires. So we have a little information for you this evening.
There's some graphs and charts in here, so it might be helpful to have a hard copy before you as I speak to these slides this evening. This is the true trick here, James. Woo! All right. Thank you so much. So I have the pleasure this evening of sharing with you all kind of an overview of federal accountability this evening and how that impacts our schools and the work that we do. The Every Student Succeeds Act kind of came in and offered this idea that we can kind of move away from the No Child Left Behind era, in which there were fewer metrics used, and a lot of people kind of experienced a different, I would say, experience with being identified as a school that was kind of labeled as failing. So the work really kind of looked to reevaluate the metric points that were being used in school districts to be able to identify not only student proficiency, but other indicators or measurements of things that we would use to define a high quality educational experience for all learners. So that brought us a new accountability system that measures academic progress of students, and then also does still maintain a system of identifying schools that do need targeted support in order to meet some of the expectations set by the State Department of Education. So this timeline is pretty interesting because it walks us through the changes in accountability, and like everything in life, COVID had a little bit of an impact on this work. So this is not new, but in 2018, the New Hampshire Department of Education implemented the new federal accountability system under ESSA, and that happens to be the same school year that one of the statewide assessments that is used to determine student proficiency changed from what then was the Smarter Balanced and is now the New Hampshire statewide assessment. So that's kind of a key year that implemented a lot of changes in our schools. In 2020, there was actually a waiver placed on both the actual assessment as well as the accountability measures for schools. So there was a big pause in that as we all shifted to remote learning during the spring of 2020. In 2021, the summative assessments did reappear, but there was still a waiver in place for accountability measures. So we did administer those assessments. In fact, that school year, we administered them twice. The first time was in the fall, and we administered the assessments to students that they would have taken the prior spring. We did that in the fall so that we could use the results from those assessments to be able to identify areas that were significant gaps in learning that needed to be attended to during that school year.
Wasn't that data you already shared with us back in a couple of weeks ago?
Correct. And then in the spring, the second summative assessment that was administered to those students was the one aligned to their roster grade level. So it provided us just different information in the spring of that year. In 2022, our New Hampshire Department of Education fully resumed the federal accountability system as well as the summative assessments. So that was the last school year. And it continues to be completely resumed. There are still some modifications in terms of how some of the indicators are being used for last school year's accountability determinations. And there are some metrics that the state is still continuing to kind of watch over time because there have been some changes in them over recent years. So before we kind of explore other metrics, it's important to know which of the assessments we administer to our students that we use to determine whether they're proficient. So in New Hampshire, we refer to those as our statewide assessments. And learners in grades 3 through 8 are taking the New Hampshire SAS, we usually refer to it as the SAS, or the statewide assessment system, and they're assessed in both English language arts as well as mathematics. There is also a science component. It's a separate part of that assessment, and that's administered in grades 5, 8, and 11. And the reason why that's grayed out is because the results from that assessment actually are not used for accountability. So we're only looking at the English language arts and the math results for proficiency. And then at the 11th grade level, as our juniors, the statewide assessment is defined to be the SAT. So those are the other results that we use to determine our school district's level of proficiency. And we also have a few learners who take some different kinds of assessments. The data on those learners is suppressed because it falls under a sample size of 11. But we do have some learners who take an alternate assessment. And while we do have the capacity to present learners to that assessment, as many learners as we feel are appropriate as determined by their IEP teams, the state only allows us to use 1% of our student population to count towards our proficiency for federal accountability. And then the final assessment that we use is called the WIDA, and this is a English language proficiency assessment and provides learners an opportunity to basically gauge the progress through which they're progressing through learning English language as a second language. And that measures 4 core areas: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And so that assessment really is measuring something completely different, but also part of our accountability data. So in addition to determining the metrics, our state has also created some long-term goals for us, and really focusing on improving student achievement across the state. And so you'll see that these long-term goals are kind of written as like a 6-year aspiration. So the first goal is related to reading proficiency. And so that 6-year goal is by 2027, that across the state, our hope is that we're reaching a 70.61% proficiency of all learners averaged across the state. And so that does include 3rd through 8th as well as 11th grade, all averaged together. In mathematics, the target goal for the proficiency rate here is 54.21%. And you might pause to ask yourself, why is there such a discrepancy between those two percentages? I had an opportunity with Linda Otten to actually work with some state representatives who work in the accountability office. And when we asked that question, there really wasn't a very informative response that was shared with us. The person who is currently in the key role of serving in the accountability office has replaced somebody, and it seemed like it was interesting that we weren't able to ascertain a whole lot of historical information about why there's such a discrepancy in those percentages. So unfortunately, I'm not able to provide any additional insight on that. And then our third kind of long-term goal from the state that's been set is as it relates to our English language learners. And so our goal by 2027 is that we have 65.20% of them progressing toward language proficiency. And then the last goal is as it relates to graduation. So we track the number of our seniors who are graduating within a 4-year time span. And the state has set our 2025 goal to be 93.96%. So while these long-term goals are really great, it's also nice to kind of do some scaffolding and step back and set some incremental goals that feel a little bit more attainable over time. So that's what we're looking at here. And you do have this flyer in your packet for you this evening if you'd like to refer to that. And essentially, this is something that's been created by our Jordan Carney in the superintendent's office. And what she's done is she's taken each of the incremental goals that have been set for each of our academic school years and added in what the goal is for both ELA and math. And then what you'll see for 2022 that will stand out to you is we do have district averages because we have that data from last spring. So you can see that while the goal was 62.54% last year, for ELA, our district data shows a proficiency rate of 45%. And over here on math, the state goal was set at 50.14%, and our district came in at 41%. Again, those are district percentages, so it's all 3 schools and all grade levels that are part of the statewide assessment. So this is something that we've been using with our educators to help have conversations with them, to inform them of our current progress and our long-term as well as short-term goals. And we hope it to be something that we will continue to complete over time. And obviously, the other hope is that with a lot of the work that we're doing to continue to plan and prepare for success, that we meet or exceed those goals that the state has set for us. So in addition to proficiency, ESSA has enabled additional metrics to be used or indicators of success that we also measure in our school district. So in addition to proficiency, we're also really examining the growth that learners make in kind of comparison to similar cohorts to one another. So that's a separate indicator that is used to essentially measure the health of our schools. And then another one is equity. And really where we're focusing on there are the proficiency and growth of our lowest performing learners over time. So that acts as an additional metric for what's used by the Federal Accountability Plan. And at the high school level, there are 2 metrics that are used. Again, they're only at the high school level because they relate to graduation rate and college and career readiness. So in addition to students who, we have the goal of those learners who are completing their 4-year journey within 4 years, and then we're also indicating the number of learners who require a 5th year to complete their graduation requirements. And then for the college and career readiness indicator, that one's kind of interesting because it's not just one set metric that's used for federal accountability. There's actually an entire list of things that can count. And so what we're measuring here are the number of seniors who have met 2 or more of the many metrics that are available. So one example of a metric that counts toward college and career readiness is meeting the benchmark on the SAT exam. So in math and English, there are scores that are set as kind of like the proficiency bar. And so if students are meeting that benchmark on that assessment, that counts as a marker for college and career readiness. Another example of that, it would be like an AP exam. So if a student earns a 3, 4, or a 5 as a score on an AP exam, that would count as another marker. So a student who earns a 3 on an AP exam and meets the benchmark on the SAT has met 2 college and career readiness markers. So we count up the students for which that's true. And other indicators that kind of nest under that include exiting a CTE program with a certification in an area, the ACT exam if a student opts to take that, or the ASVAB military exam if a student opts to take that and earns a certain score. Those are all additional markers that can be used to identify whether students are college and career ready. And I also shouldn't leave out that running start courses, which are kind of dual enrollment, so they're earning credit here at the Interlakes Middle High School, and they're also earning some college level credits to kind of start their pathway forward. So that would be another example of a marker that would count for that. So the thing that the Department of Ed has also been really hard at work doing is kind of lifting all of this information and making it accessible in order for us to better be able to like interpret our results from these assessments and to be able to kind of interact more fluidly with our data. And so they built this entire thing that they refer to as the I-platform. And within the I-platform, there's a lot of different things you can do. You can actually I can get lost in it. I don't know about everybody else, but I could spend days in here. This is part of the I-platform. It's called I Achieve. And on this particular part of the website, we're able to so it's defaulted to the New Hampshire state data. So everything is visible and accessible. So we can see with just a few clicks across the state how many students have been assessed. We do monitor participation on these important assessments because that's part of our accountability measurement. And then, would you mind going back to the top? Thank you. And then it's very interactive. So if we're focused on just looking at maybe it's working. It worked. Proficiency and growth. Oh, that's perfect. So again, while the state has set targets of 62.5% for ELA proficiency, we can see that they too are falling short of meeting their own goals. So as a state collectively, we're really still aspiring to reach last year's goals, really. So I Achieve is kind of a static place where you can search by district, you can look at our state averages, and then there's also another part of I-platform that enables people to kind of just dig a little bit more deeper and kind of ask questions like, I wonder about a school this size, or I wonder about whatever the different metrics are that we track across accountability, and we can do a lot of filtering and refreshing of information to be able to help answer those questions. It's been really informative and has helped Linda and I actually reach out to some other districts across the state, when we're kind of making some observations about, I wonder how that school has done X, Y, or Z, and how we can learn from that in order to kind of question how we're maybe doing some practices. So it's been really helpful to have that data all accessible. Can we go back, James? Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So really, kind of focusing on that one component of ESSA is that we're required to really monitor student progress. And then the other part is that when schools are struggling to meet some of those metrics and indicators successfully, there is another part of ESSA that requires schools to identify those that are in most need of support. So in the state of New Hampshire, we have essentially 3 different possibilities that can come of a year's worth of data, or in some cases, every 3 years. And so one of those levels is called targeted support and improvement. And that is something that's identified annually. And there's actually no exit criteria should a school become identified there. It's just an annual determination that is created by our Department of Education. So specifically the criteria that they're using are schools with a subgroup in the lowest performing 5% of all schools in that particular subgroup for 2 consecutive years. So, you read something that's complex like that, and you can naturally appreciate that the state has also built an I-platform where we can, within a few clicks, look at across the state where other districts are falling, and we can see right where our schools are kind of rank ordered. And it's incredibly informative and helps drive where our focus needs to be as we continue to reach the goals that our state has set, or even beyond that. And then every 3 years, there are other determinations. So again, criteria for those two levels. And essentially, it's our responsibility to evaluate that data, identify schools who need additional support, and then there is additional support that is provided in the form of funding and support that the school identifies as needing to help them make the progress that they need. And so naturally, I think we're kind of, okay, well, let's go back to that data from the last time that we looked at that, and kind of, okay, now that we see all the indicators and the metrics, where did our data fall last school year? So this is last spring's data, which you have seen, but it helps us to kind of maybe put it in a different lens, right? So we're thinking about proficiency here, and to just orientate you to the graph, the blue bars reflect our school district performance. So we're starting with grade 3, 4, all the way to 8, and we're focusing on English language arts. And specifically the percentage of learners who were proficient on the statewide assessment last spring. And then the red dot reflects where the state average fell for each grade level. So you can see some years where we fell significantly below, and others where we're kind of more on line with that state average. And I will say, one of the unique things about this population of learners is this is a population that we've been really focusing on as we followed them through their school years, and will continue to do so. We do have a high concentration of learners who are on IEPs in that cohort, and so definitely is an area of focus for us. And then I guess the other thing to call attention to is the red line does indicate where that state goal was for last school year. Again, to kind of summarize back to your flyer, our goal was 62.5%. The state average came in at 51%, and our district came in at 45% in English language arts. And those are, that is a district percentage of proficiency. So naturally, we're curious about what that math picture looks like from last spring. So similar that the blue bars reflect our district performance by grade level, and the red dots reflect our state grade level averages, and the red line was the proficiency target for last spring. So in math, our goal was set at 50% proficiency. We came in at 41% as a district, and the state's proficiency average was 40% last year. So these graphs reflect our performance 3 to 8, and then this slide brings us back to the SAT data from last school year. So the focus here is really on the percentage of learners who have met the benchmark for proficiencies. So we're probably kind of more drawn to those red areas, but this is incredible to celebrate. 50% of our juniors last year met both benchmarks, so for both reading and math, which is significant. And if we come over here and break it down by content area, this is our reading progress. So the state goal was at, again, 62.5, and our juniors came in at 63%, and the state average was 62%. And then just looking at our math proficiency, you can see a pretty incredible difference here, where the blue bar is us here at Interlakes, 56%, far exceeding the state goal, which was set at just slightly over 50. And then the state average was 37% proficient in math last year. So naturally, we're incredibly data-driven here, and we've been using this information since last spring to really identify, what are the concerns, and then what is the action plan? Like, what are we going to do with this information to better prepare our teachers and our learners for success, for heightened success as we move forward? And one of the things that we're really grateful to is the position of Dean of Learning, which has enabled us to really do a lot of things. And just highlighting on a few of those this evening. One would be Linda has stepped into a role really learning from our guidance departments who are exceptional educators at making a smooth assessment experience happen for our learners. So Linda's been really mentoring with all of our guidance counselors in the district to be able to learn more about that process, to be able to take over some of those responsibilities so that our guidance department can be more integrated in some classroom lessons with focusing on social emotional learning and some other needs that we've identified at the district level. And in addition to that, Linda also has the ability to really push into classrooms. So I'm gonna stop talking now and I'm gonna pass it over to her because she's gonna really get into depth about some of the things that we've done to really prepare our learners and educators.
You can get it to the next one. I probably won't be able to.
Okay, perfect. So with all that said, this is my first year as the Dean of Learning, 30 years as a classroom teacher. I was primarily a math teacher, 7 to 12. And just to kind of piggyback what Erica is saying, our guidance counselor, our principals, Elaine, people have been wonderfully supportive and really helped me with this journey. So really I'm gonna highlight some of where we started with all of this, taking a look at all the data. First, we started looking at the 2021 data, then we started looking at the 2022 data. And we started thinking, how do we engage our teachers so that they can support our learners for the SAT and also for the New Hampshire SAS. So back in December, both Holly Veaton and I, the director of guidance, we both presented to the high school during collaborative planning blocks the federal accountability and our role of New Hampshire statewide assessments. We were looking at our SATs, our PSATs, our NEWA, our New Hampshire SAS. We were looking at all different types of assessments, and we were talking about how to, the accountability awareness. We shared that the graphic that you have, not quite like that, but we showed that this is where we need to be by 2027. So every single teacher, I primarily work with Interlakes Middle High School and also the elementary school, because the following month they did a very similar presentation down at the elementary school. So every single educator between those two schools, and I know that Jeremy has done the same with his educators at Sandwich. Then after that, another one of my first projects was the New Hampshire SAS. They give out vocabulary that's aligned for each single grade level for English, for ELA, math, and science. So what we did as part of this project was came up with all of those definitions, got input from all of the math teachers, ELA teachers, and our science teachers were phenomenal for that. And then from there, Erica made flashcards, and again, those were one of the supports that the teachers were able to use in order to help with this vocabulary from New Hampshire SAS. After that, we offered, Eric and I designed a retreat, a 5-part series, and it came out, the first one, unfortunately, I think we had to cancel because it came out so quick, so we didn't have a lot of people to attend that. But then the next 2 retreat series, we had some great attendance from a lot of teachers from Sandwich and also our reading specialists in both buildings. And it was very eye-opening because it was very collaborative. We got a lot of information from teachers, reading specialists that had been in other districts, and so they came with some great information to share with us. The other piece that I have to really emphasize is that I've been working very closely with Mike Bryant and his staff, because I will say that, as Erica said, that our guidance counselors are extremely well versed in this. And so eventually this is where I will be, shifting my position, that I will be taking that over. And so had monthly, weekly meetings for several months, how to get this all started and ready to go. And the first part is that teachers have to take a test administration certification. It takes about 30 minutes, but they need to take that test administration certification in order to get into the portal so that they can actually start viewing some of the questions potentially on SAS and also modulars or interims.
So here are all the pieces that they can use when practicing with their learners. We also went over some item test type tutorials. These were all these links and resources that all teachers had their hands and were available to them. We also, when they were getting into the New Hampshire portal, they were practicing the digital tools with their students so that when they were actually taking the test, they knew how to use the calculator, how to use the dictionary, and different pieces that you have to use because there's quite a bit that they need to use using when they're taking these tests. There were also released student work samples and also writing rubrics. Again, those were all shared with all teachers. All of this was all taking place during collaborative planning blocks, district extended afternoons, and also faculty meetings. Another presentation that we had was some New Hampshire SAS data reflection. Teachers came together in 6 different groups because we put them in different groups with grade level. And this was down at the elementary school, just so that they could start looking at some trends, things that they need to be working on across the board. So we were looking at some vertical alignment. And then the New Hampshire planning sheets. This was something that Erica put together, which really really showed how our students did last year and how they scored. Then after that, probably about in April, in March, I started going into some classrooms and I was able to sit with them, get their modulars up, really learn the process for the students to understand how to log in, how to use the tools, what it looks like. And then I also put together a video for the district on how to use the modulars and how to use the reporting. What happens is that I think some teachers were maybe a little kind of tentative to get into some of the modulars because they get into the modulars, well then how did our learners do? That's really what we want to take a look at. We want to look at that information so we can look at, so if they have 12 questions in math, we see number 7, we see, 10% of them got that correct. Well, obviously that's a question that we need to go over with our learners. So that was a lot of work that I did going into the classes. I went and I worked with teachers both at the elementary school and also at the middle school between 7th and 8th grade teachers. It's been a lot of work. I am really proud of where we are going forward. I'm looking forward to what we're going to do next year because we already have all these ideas of how to hit the ground running and how we can do this better.
So, absolutely. So at this point, if there are any questions?
I have a few. So over the years of being on the board, I've noticed that the 4th and 5th grade continually kind of struggles those grade levels. And it seems to be kind of a pattern. So I'm wondering, have you seen that when you looked at year to year?
So the assessment did change. What's interesting, some of the observations you may have made were on a different assessment than the current New Hampshire SAS. For the 4th grade class, that is in 2022, which is our current 5th graders. They have a significant number of needs in that particular class, but it'll be interesting to check your observation with that 3rd grade group, which is now going to be 4th graders.
Right.
I think it was 4 or 5 years ago.
To see how they continue to do.
It's during Mary period, but
Yeah.
I agree, I remember seeing that.
I remember seeing that, but it could be different assessments, and then the other question that I have is for the SATs. Does every single student take the SAT now?
Unless they are
Okay.
taking the alternative assessment.
Okay,
And that would be through the special education process, and that is, actually as a whole state, only 1% of the state is allowed to take the alternative assessment. So it's a pretty significant process.
So Mary, just for clarification, so every student has to take the SAT? now?
Correct, because it became the state assessment.
and that wasn't the case a few
Correct.
years back,
Right,
right, where that was up to the person.
2016 is when the state of New Hampshire adopted the SAT as the statewide assessment.
What year, I'm sorry? Erin?
2016.
Wow.
2018 is the year that the former statewide assessment for grades 3 through 8 is called Smarter Balanced, which may, bring forward a memory.
Yeah.
And 2018 is when it was switched. So this is still a relatively new assessment, and I think that's,
Yeah.
we don't want to lose sight of that either. We have a lot to learn about it. We learn something every day, and it helps us to be better at administering it and supporting our teachers and learners with being prepared for it. There are even some tools that we were able to uncover where there were a lot of ahas this year with the teachers that we worked with. And I'll use the spell check as an example in the writing component. It had not been known by many that there was a spell check feature available to learners as they're interacting with the test items. So, that alone feels
Wow.
like a massive step forward.
So you think for third graders sitting down to, it's a portal,
Right.
that's where those modulars come into play, giving them more experience. And so having teachers have a better understanding of how those modulars work and how to access them and how to incorporate them into their classroom. It really allows, the kids to have more familiarity.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know
That
that
makes
the
sense.
feature's there, right? We all know,
You're
we
not
sit
gonna
down
use them and that
to
could
something
not
that's different.
benefit you and your
Correct.
score. But that's why I think for me anyway, having 3 kids go through colleges, some colleges don't even look at the SATs anymore. It's not mandatory. They focus on essays and your GPAs and all the other things that go with it, because let's face it, sometimes people, right, have issues with,
Not
getting
everybody
nervous.
tests
Nobody
as a
tests, some
standardized
people,
test well.
right,
Some.
some do.
So, but it is the state assessment test, so that was a big change. So our goal was to bring awareness. We are engaging now and taking the 2023 assessments for 3 through 8. We have our SAT data, and we will bring back data once we have it completed so that you can see where we are in that, again, scaffolded process of reaching that benchmark in the 2027, right?
Correct.
Can I ask a question that it's sort of based on something you asked before, Craig, but do the teachers get, I know with Maria, they would get pretty detailed information about where each child was in the, and what particular issues they needed to work on in order to improve. Does the SAS do that same thing, or?
Similar but different. I will say that firstly, the 2 tests are incredibly different in the sense that question items on the NWEA are really aligned to singular standards of learning, and the SAS is really designed to be something that's more integrative in nature. So you may have a test item that is assessing not just one skill, but perhaps 3 or 4. So the kinds of questions are a little bit different. And so the data that comes back from it is a little bit more high level than the NWEA. So I think the way our teachers probably interact with those assessments, I think it'd be fair to say that they would use the NWEA results more to drive like their immediate instructional planning decisions, whereas the SAS feels more like the summative end of year experience for them.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Has this assessment been out long enough and you've been using it long enough so you're feeling like the data that it's generating, we have confidence in our data that we're reviewing?
We do. We actually have been integrating the results from this assessment in our grade level data walls, and it helps us to triangulate what we're seeing and to be able to evaluate student progress and growth. We're also able to kind of unpack the scores that come from this assessment are 1 of 4, so it's level 1, 2, 3, or 4. 3 is proficient, 4 is beyond. But then those scores also unpack to show the proficiency level with which students are falling into the 2 reading types, and then there's a separate writing score, so we can see how their some of their individual writing skills are also falling. And so that was all data that was shared with the teachers in the planning sheets so that they could kind of drill down to help identify, what are the skills that seem to be the most common that our students are struggling with the most. So things that they would be able to address from like a full classroom level. And then also, pairing that with other data that we use in our data walls from other assessments to get more granular at different skills. So,
Thank you.
for sure, of course.
I would just like to thank the staff. They've really been engaging. When I walk around for visits, I see, people partnering up, really digging into writing, working with kids with the modulars. I want to thank Mrs. Papalardo, Ms. Otten for their engagement and really helping to bring the conversation to a full district conversation. And Mr. Ryan and Mr. Hilger have really been very active trying to gain traction. So I think this has been a year to gain some traction in this area.
Madam Chair, can I just ask one question? Maybe in two parts, I guess. But, we have the different three types of schools, right? That are in the grade levels for the state to offer support. I guess what support does the state provide, and where do you think we are with our current scores? Are we in one of those three support type
So,
areas?
that's a great question, and it was one that Linda and I had, and really one of the questions that inspired our meeting with the Accountability Office at the State Department of Education. So, I didn't provide you a copy, and maybe should have, certainly can, is that the state takes each of the indicators that is used to determine accountability and creates essentially a rating scale. And each indicator is assessed on it's kind of separated into 4 different performance levels, if you will. And then there's an entire decision-making matrix that exists that they then use. So each indicator, if you will, we get a rating level from that. So we're either 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then there's an entire decision matrix that's used that is kind of like a little bit of a flow chart that's like, okay, if you're level 1, here's where you fall. If you're level 2, here's where you fall. And I would say that before meeting with the State Department of Ed, I don't think that either one of us had a clear, I don't want to speak for you, but personally felt like I really didn't have a good feel for where we stood. And it was really eye-opening to learn from the state's support. And I feel confident that, while it is concerning that we're far from meeting the state average goals, it seems like we are not near being in one of those 3 categories for being identified for needing additional improvement. We did also ask the question, what does support look like for schools? And I think that was another question that we didn't really receive a clear answer on, mostly because that answer does not come from the Accountability Office at the State Department of Ed. It comes from a different office, and where we've been trying to focus on getting up and running for this spring's SAS, which is ongoing currently. It's a lingering question that we definitely would like to learn more about. The list of schools that are identified is public information. It's posted on the Department of Education's website. So we do definitely have on our plan for ongoing work to try to reach out to some of the administrators in those districts to just learn more about, what their experience has been determining, depending upon which of the 3 lists they fall on, and the work that they've done to be able to meet the exit criteria. So it's definitely on our ongoing list of things to continue to learn.
But to be clear, we are not on that
No,
list.
yeah.
We are not. Just making sure that.
Thank you very much, very
Of course,
prepared, very nice.
Thank you. I want to see if there's any public comments.
I have not
Thank you.
received anything.
Because it's been a while.
Charity, sorry.
Thank you.
If I'm doing this right, there's been no activity.
Okay, yes.
I do have a question actually on this. In terms of the creation of this proficiency at the state level, the number in this case, 62.54. Do you have any data on how the state derived that as the target? In other words,
Mm.
New Hampshire is falling below and Interlakes is way below. And that first, I think it was the second chart you had 3 horizontal bar charts. And the state average, the pink one, was well below what the state said it should have been. I mean, I guess another way to phrase it is the target of 62% realistic, and who says it is? You know what I mean? Where does it come from?
That's a great question. It was one of the first ones that we asked the accountability support when we met with them. And unfortunately, we did not get a very detailed response. It seems like holding on to the historical information after having a personnel change in that position has produced kind of a gap in some historical knowledge. So we have not identified that yet. We also found it interesting that kind of the increments don't seem similar across content areas. So, there are certainly mathematical observations we've made and more questions that we have formulated than, unfortunately, responses that we have to date. Right now, I don't have a better answer.
I guess
For where the
I forget
target-
who asked the question here about trusting the data. Was it you, Charlie, that was asking? If we don't, I guess it comes down to trust. Do we trust that the numbers the state has set are real so that we can trust the data that we're inputting into the system? And the chart, as my kids are out of school, but our progress is disconcerting based on that. But this is 1 year snapshot.
Correct.
My mind says next year, those bars will shift over by a grade, hopefully. I mean, it's encouraging to see the progress from 4, 5, 6, 7, I believe.
Because
It dropped at 8, but next year that 8 will be the 7, So I understand this is a
Right.
process, and we'll have data, comparative data year over year. Starting next year, we'll have at least 2 years to compare against. I guess it's just, again, you even mentioned the NEWAs and the smarter balance and all these other testing mechanisms. We throw them out and start over. So again, maybe Charlie's point about how do we trust the data when the data keeps changing? The goal is to make it better. And to me, 50% proficiency in a school is still substandard. 62 is reasonable. There's a standard deviation in there. Maybe 67 would be great, 2/3 of the students. So I guess if the state is promoting this, there are programs or paths in place, if you're sub-proficient, whatever the things are, will help you in these areas, or will tell you where your deficiency areas are. But it's kind of, I don't quite know where the question is. It's one thing to say, we'd love to get to this level,
Sure.
without actually saying, this is very specifically how we're going to achieve 62.5%. You know what I mean? Very amorphous kind of.
Of course, and I think that's part of our responsibility, right? So when we go back and look at the historical data that we do, and we've identified what have been our practices in the past, and I will say that the plan that we have implemented this year has been significant. So I am expecting, I know Mr. Bryan has already been logging in, looking at student data, and I have as well, and the SAT is still coming, but we're sitting at the edge of our seats waiting, because we know that we have had educators really lean in, and they have been doing some incredible work of doing some preparation that we have not historically tapped into. And I think you're bringing to mind another one of the big aha moments we have with an educator who looked at us at our first retreat and said, oh yeah, that practice test, it's the same one every year, it's the same questions, I never get data. And Linda and I were like, you're not actually accessing the modular, let us show you how. And that teacher was just like, whoa, I didn't even know I could do this. Quick little 15-minute practice sessions, whether they're projecting the question full class and showing students, this is a tool, here's how you expand the text, here's how you highlight something, and so we're really excited. We have no other reason than to believe that the work that our educators have done with us to prepare in very different ways that we've never done before certainly will show in our results this spring. It is certainly our hope. And as Linda mentioned, we've already been talking forward about next school year. So one of the decisions we've made is that wouldn't it be great if all of our teachers completed that test certification administration right at the fall, right at the start of the year, so that right from the get-go, they've got the entire year up until the spring to do some of the practice tests, so that they're not doing it all, the 2 weeks before the actual assessment, right? Having the ability to kind of parse that practice out and do repeated practice over time will certainly more benefit our learners. We've also talked about exploring some other, building in some assessment menu requirements that would ask teachers to engage in a certain number of the practice tests. So, there are other things that we're already starting to think about after having gone through a very intense year of planning and preparation in order to make next year all that more successful. And add to that the fact that we're gonna have a whole nother set of data from this school year is exciting.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other public comments?
Received
Because
anything
I'm gonna
here?
close public comments at 7:04. Okay, moving right along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Roofing replacement contracts.
Right, so we have attachment 5, in your packet. This did go through a good process. We did not put on a motion, that certainly you can wait till the next meeting, or if you're so inclined. Mr. Swanker is recommending the low bidder, who's met the specifications. And so there's 2 groups. We have one at Interlakes Elementary School. You have in your packet the section, and then the other is at the middle high school, the gym, that is to take care of some leaking that we have going on to, I guess,
We budgeted for this too.
we did.
And what will we budget for it? How much did we budget for this project?
The amount shown.
Was the gym unexpected, Ryan?
No, that was in our CIP.
It was.
Yeah. It's not a replacement, but the high school program, it's all EPDM rubber roofing.
Yes.
And as long as the rubber hasn't gone bad, we can rejuvenate that rubber with that siliconized coating and get another 30-year warranty out of the existing there. And with the roofing we have in the gym, that's why we're moving forward with that section.
We're getting there. 3 or 4 more or less sections left.
The high school has no longer has the removal and replace of ballast roof. It is complete.
Okay.
And
That's the one that was replaced 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that one will still stay on the program of the coating. Like
Yeah.
going to the gym, which is,
Section 9.
could be 1/3 of the cost to replace it.
Prices have changed a tad in the last 2 years.
They're volatile, up and down.
So again, we didn't put a motion on. If the board wants to wait, that can happen at the next meeting, or if you are so inclined, you can make a motion this evening.
This was planned and
Yeah, why
pretty
not?
straightforward.
Let's do it.
I'd make a motion to approve the
I'd
Mr.
second it.
Swanker's recommendation.
Mr. Chair, can I have a comment?
Sure.
Second. So the last time I replaced a roof this size, the insurance company wanted to know that, the material used would meet the wind loads, et cetera. Do we have any comments about that? Do we need anything, our insurance agent to come out and make sure we're getting the right roofing on?
We're using the same ones each year that we've been replacing that do meet. They are the newer mechanically fastened roofs.
Okay.
we do, I'm trying to, Primex has a form at the end of each year that we update assets and I'm trying to think of the name of that form though. But we do update Primex on what work has been done.
And we'll confirm, I mean, we can
Yeah.
certainly confirm.
All right, very good.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And so next is the lunch prices, 2023, 2024, attachment 6.
So again, we didn't put a motion on, you can do that at the April the April meeting, I'm going back in time, the second May meeting. If you'd like, or if you're comfortable this evening, we are requesting to increase the cost of full price lunch by 25 cents for K to 12 and for adults. And this is there's a paid equity tool that the goal is to try to get what you're asking people paying for lunch to come in line with what the reimbursement is from the federal government for lunches.
Okay.
Yep, is
I'll
there a
make a
second?
motion.
Okay.
Second.
I have a question about this, just a second. Do we participate in the farm to school?
We have fruits and vegetable program. Farm to school is not one that I believe we're a participant of. I'd have to check on that.
It's a reimbursement program that schools can access in order to gain like fruits and vegetables from local farms.
Okay. So I'm happy to look into that, but we do the fruit and vegetables program, which we do qualify. ILES qualifies for federal reimbursement on that. So I'm happy to look into that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
And we did 276 lunches to date per day, 114 breakfasts per day. This is down from when we had free complete. So if you recall, last year was free across the board. 529 lunches last year compared to 276, 306 breakfasts compared to 114. So that free seemed to make a difference, as well as we are also in transition. We have a new vendor this year, and that's always, transitions are not always easy, but it certainly is something to keep in mind that free did seem to bolster people accessing.
Donations, attachments 7 through 9 in your packet. I guess we can go over these all together.
Yes.
To be applied to the student activities for the robotics club, donation from Hart's Restaurant in the amount of $500. Donation from Lynn Health in the amount of $500. Donation from Christopher Thoreau in the amount of $1,200 to be applied to the student activities at the prom party club. Donation from Mayhew Funeral Home in the amount of $250. Donation from Interlakes Animal Hospital in the amount of $250. Donation from D&J Automotive in the amount of $500. Donation from the Interlakes PTO in the amount of $500. I have a motion to accept donations
So
from
moved.
gratitude. Second, and Nancy.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Hiring update, Mrs. Moriarty.
So attachment 10, you have, which is a list of our number of teachers or in paraeducator positions that we are presently trying to fill and where we are with meeting filling. There are 2 nominations this evening before you that would fill 2 of the open positions, one at ILES and one at the middle high school. Certainly the board hasn't had a chance in non-public to review those yet, so that may be something you want to do
I would like
later,
questions.
but we have been trying to be very active in filling positions. It's a time of year that, we're in competition with other school districts as well as contract signing and so forth. So I really do want to commend our principals and directors for really being very active in getting positions filled in a timely way.
Okay, I do have some questions, so I think I
Sure.
would like to have another non-public to ask them, if that's okay with people.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we'll get back to that when we can come out of non-public and nominate in public. Old business, architectural update, and that would be the ILMHS locker room.
So we wanted this evening to give you a sense of where things are in terms of some ideas that the architect has developed. There's no need to take any kind of action this evening. This really is informational so that you have an awareness of what has been achieved to date. So I'll let Mr. Swanker introduce.
Yep, everyone, this is Norman Larson, who's an architect representative from Chris Williams Architect Firm. Norman's been the sole, basically, architect working on the project for us, and has met with us and given them the needs of the scope of work, and this is really a first look at, the kind of first draft round of everything that we asked for, shoehorned into our small rectangle.
And we're gonna look at A1, James. You can go to the next document. And you have a copy of that in front of you? That's why I made a copy.
Oh, that one.
And the first, the kind of significant change that was requested by really law and athletics is to have 4 separate spaces, not just a team room, as we were calling one thing before, and a locker room, but just 4 separate spaces that could be used for educational, physical ed purposes, and also as team rooms, and also provide that 3rd or 4th option if needed as either a neutral space or just, however you want to identify that space. And all spaces right now have kind of been unidentified where Norman thought he'd use the school colors and went with blue and white. So the representation that you're seeing is the blue locker room and white locker room. Again, just through the school colors, no other reason. It was requested that currently we have a shared PE teacher office, which lacks supervision to any of the locker rooms. So we're trying to increase supervision. And so 2 PE teacher offices were added, all within the locker room set that could have supervision into the room, or at least supervision of access to those spaces in and out. So if you can follow along, there's kind of, maybe I should give you just kind of a quick overview of some icons, huh, Norman? Like small square boxes would be a tall stand-up locker. The other ones are the larger sit-down equipment locker, currently as the team room has now. So the thought is that, for during the day, educational use, PE locker room would be used more for changing and student needs. And then each space has also a team space that has larger lockers for larger equipment. And Ms. Dumais had input on lockers for after hours, even the PE space. That style locker works better for, say, lacrosse or baseball. Whereas if you think more of large equipment like football, or I don't know what else has large equipment, but there's 4 different spaces, but it's mirrored on itself. So you're offering the same thing 2 times at least. Bathrooms.
Yeah, I think the key,
Interject.
it's interesting to hear somebody else like talk about.
Explaining your work. Please.
Have some fun. I think the key was to meet the expectations of Title IX, which really wanted for an egalitarian approach to the two spaces. And so one of the things that I worked for was to make sure that each side was identical enough to each other that there's no reason to pick one space or another. You could change every season or every year if you wanted to, which is intended to be there. But it is intended that the white side, what's shown here is the side for the white team and side for the blue team, that those areas would be the same gender, because there is a vestibule for each space on the gym side, and there's a separate vestibule on the back side for the theater side. And that vestibule provides a visual privacy into the locker rooms. So the intention is that the people who go into that space, that's where the spaces, when in use, become gender specific. The team rooms on both sides both accommodate 50 of the larger lockers. The current team space that you have has 49 in it. 50 was decided the number. And both team rooms provide a space for the team to gather in sort of in a central space to strategize or whatever they want to do before they go out after halftime. The PE teacher offices are located in the PE locker rooms or off the PE locker rooms, and that was there's a lot of discussion about the need for supervising the students while at the same time providing privacy. And so by moving the locker rooms by moving the offices effectively into the locker room space, it provides that opportunity for the sort of that watchfulness. All of the I don't know if you know, but generally most kids are not using showers in school anymore. In the boys' side right now, there are 2 showers, both in the PE space, which go relatively unused. And there's a single restroom, also accessed through the PE space. So the students in the team space have to go through the PE locker room to get to those restrooms and showers. These spaces are all, each locker room, the 2 PE locker rooms and the 2 team locker rooms are all securable with doors at each vestibule, and they each have within them one bathroom that's handicap accessible and another bathroom that's handicap accessible with an accessible shower. So there's the ability for students to access things directly in the space itself. And since most of the time, most of the time when the team locker room is in use, the PE locker room is not, and vice versa, the other bathrooms of the 4 become available to anyone who's using those locker rooms. So there's sort of an extended opportunity for anyone to use a private bathroom, which we figured was like a good positive step to take. The PE lockers, just so you know, the count is there are 30 half-height lockers in each PE space and 20 tall lockers that would hold lacrosse stick or something like that. And that was felt to be like the right balance to make sure that these rooms could serve everyone. There are no urinals, everything is the same, and so I left it to whoever to decide whenever they want to change who's using what. And I'm happy to label that a different way. I just needed some way to call them A or B or something. So I just went with your colors.
So down below,
Oh.
you'll see the athletic trainer space is space that's been displaced and needs a home.
Yes. So the other spaces that we're talking about. So yes, there is currently in the the boys' side, there is an athletic trainer space which is accessed currently off of what is currently or what's defined here as the blue vestibule. That space is small and it's inadequate for the needs of the trainers. So one of the things we're trying to do was to bolster the program and to allow for some additional equipment that makes that job easier. This is a much smaller version than all of the things would be great to have, but it seems to be the best accommodation of a reasonable set of improvements. So we're looking to incorporate that and find a space. The other is the staff area, which if you are familiar with this is the, I believe you call that the faculty lounge, or I'm not sure what it's called.
It's the space off of the cafeteria and the gym music room hallway. There's a staff room that has actually 2 bathrooms within it. Part of NHIAA for the referees, they need to have a private space and they need to have a shower. So right now, we've been able to meet that in the current physical education teacher's office. There is a bathroom and a shower. They're not ADA accessible by any means, but it allows us to check the box for the NHIAA. So the thinking is that we can basically renovate one of the bathrooms in that staff space, that staff lounge. And that will meet the private space for the NHIAA, as well as allow us to get better room efficiency use, and because that's space that's not used at night during games by staff. So it'll allow us to utilize the current space in a better way for the locker rooms and use the current space in the teacher's lounge to meet the NHIAA standard.
I think it was also one of the initial notions in expanding and putting a shower here. It also makes a shower and lockers available to staff if they wanted to use it also.
And we do have staff that work out as part of, the wellness, and they do utilize the current one, but it doesn't have a lot of privacy. So I think tonight was just to bring awareness. I'm sure you have lots of questions. I think it takes time to look at these. I think one of the things that's worth kind of capturing is there really are 4 spaces. So that does allow some flexibility. Potentially you could have a gender neutral. You could close down and use a team room as a locker room space for physical education in a different way, because there's access from the other hallway. There's some unique opportunities, I think, by this design. But certainly you need lots of opportunity to look at it. So maybe we can have Norm come back at another time and have maybe a little work session to ask some questions, but I know the evening's about a little longer than you planned.
One quick question, and it's the number of lockers in the different styles. Case in point, the football team that has a lot of equipment, do they put their equipment in until the end of the season, or does it come out every day?
So do you want to talk, Sarah, to how they store?
Currently, the football team has a football side, because they have 2 rooms on their side, and they currently leave their helmet and their shoulder pads in their locker overnight.
Okay.
Any other questions? Right.
I guess I'm concerned about the proposed trainer space that has no location.
So later on in the agenda, I propose that might the board consider utilizing some time, architectural time, to look at, I think, some other spaces where that can go and some other needs. Because I think that there's some reworking of some potential classroom space that might be a solution.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, just
go
one
ahead.
more. And you've gotten all the data you need of the building to know that this plan fits without major modifications to the structure.
The structure is sort of convenient. On the drawing, there's a set of grid lines, and the grids indicate the structural layout of the columns. That space is generally, the roof over that space is generally supported on the exterior masonry walls and the freestanding structure that's within it on those columns. This work, unlike the sort of upgrading and tweaking that was done to make the team rooms happen, really does require the removal of everything in that space. And so the only thing we have to actually coordinate with is those post locations. And so those are shown.
HVAC, everything else is okay.
HVAC is part of a package that's
That'll,
part of the.
once we know the floor plan, the kind of final floor plan, we'll get HVAC in there.
But there's a rigid ceiling in the space that I'm not certain that it's actually, if you remove the walls, whether it's level, but in the end, it will be set level per space, modified as necessary, but there's space above it for ductwork and plumbing and other pieces. And we will have to cut, I was able to lay this out in a way that puts a lot of the plumbing for this, the restrooms in the center at the location where the existing plumbing is, and the other plumbing locations are grouped together. So we should only have to trench 2 trenches from the new bathroom locations to that center space. We should hopefully be able to preserve the slab as long as we can, we use a finish that will let us work with that.
And the existing structural perimeter, if you follow the purple center line on that
Yeah.
14-inch masonry wall, and he preserved all that structural wall and the openings that are in it as well, so we're not even disturbing just to move the door opening.
Excellent.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the ILMHS main entrance sign updates, attachment 11.
So, after the last board meeting, it seemed like maybe there were still some, questions about the sign. We brought you possibly 3 options. There could be other options, that maybe would be more, palatable. One of the things that I think is beneficial that we are able to do, is an electronic sign. That has a lot of benefits to us in terms of being able to do multiple announcements in a day versus when you have just changing the letters, you're, really kind of committed to that for at least a day, if not more. So there's some nice benefit to having a electronic message board, and because of being a school, we do have that ability. We're not tied to the ordinances around electronic message boards. And so, I don't know if it's helpful if the board wants to give us an amount that you'd like us to stay within, and then you allow Mr. Swanker to kind of create something, or if you want to pick one of the options, or if you want to put a la carte together and get a camel.
May I ask a question? Brian, if we do option 1, could an electronic sign be added in the future?
If we probably just have to resize that mock-up a little bit, but I suppose you could, it would be possible, yeah.
Can there be an electronic message board without the backlit logo?
Well, we'll have to light that sign somehow, so the backlit lettering, I think, it would be replaced by like gooseneck lighting. I don't think there's any savings there.
Duncan.
I have, through this process, initially been fairly sympathetic to the needs of a modern sign, particularly a messaging board. I think we're in a place where we have to carefully look at what we absolutely need and what would be nice to have. And I can understand that it would be really nice to have a modern electronic sign. I am concerned that we have a lot of big ticket things happening, and I find myself over the last few weeks really leaning more towards what you've articulated as option 1. And I find it hard to imagine spending that extra $40,000 on the electronic sign. I do understand that it would be nice, and that many schools in our areas use electronic signs and have found the money to do that. I'm really worried about big ticket costs that we need to scale back. So I would support option 1, or maybe 1A as Charlie is describing.
I have a question too. Brian, when I owned my store, I had a company called Daktronics for electric signs. They do schools and they do gas stations and so forth. I don't know if you had the opportunity to look, because their prices are really reasonable and they do a good job with the electronic signs. I don't know if that could be an option, but I did look at other schools like Moulton Borough Academy and, to see if they had electric signs. I did not see any.
Prospect Mountain has one.
Well, Well, I'm just saying, the ones that are like Gilbert and Molten Borough, and I'm just saying, it would be nice to have it, but as Duncan pointed out, we have a lot of big ticket items that we're looking at, so, you know, the sign might not be in the same need category.
I have found that giving Mr. Schwanker a little bit of latitude has delivered very well over his tenure here. My proposal is give him $100,000 and say, do the best you can. But I think the electronic sign is important. It is the first thing you see if there's a change or an event or something else like that. And I think that we have a couple of estimates modestly below 100, and we have a couple of estimates modestly above. I think in the long term, the electric message board for that amount of money, 39,000, I think it was.
That's if you went through a sign company, I think there's
Right.
a markup there, so that's why I'm saying,
Yeah.
maybe if we go direct, it might be a big cost saving.
That's the part I said I trust.
I can get prices from other electronic sign companies. That price was direct from Watchfire with no markup from Hawkhead. And I would say that Watchfire probably is the top of the line clearest display unit. And there are others that could be, vetted out, looked at, and get prices on.
Right, we might not need the top of the line, but Nancy, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming back with a couple of different options because, and $100,000 feels way too much for me. I would be comfortable saying 70 and find an electronic sign option. Not doing the stonework looked good, but the brick looks fine too, but it just really felt like too much, but I really appreciate the other options. And I do hear because somebody has to go out there and change those other signs, so, right?
Yes.
It is
So you're
labor.
talking about somebody's time as well, which is a cost.
Thank you for that. That's very good.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
You know, I was a supporter last time. I think I made the original motion, but I too have really been thinking. And we have a number of things literally since our last meeting that have transpired. One we talked about earlier in our non-public session. I think we're going to be talking about another one in a later non-public session. And I feel like Duncan does, I think we have $40,000 encumbered for this. And I think we need to tell Brian, I'm sorry, but you need to go with the 40,000 and do what we can with that. And because we have people issues that we are gonna have to address.
I have another question. Can we rework the material on the sign that's there, the existing sign? Sometimes sign companies can do that.
Your
I
soul
don't know.
goes.
I don't know how
It's really old.
is it bad?
That's a hand painted on aluminum sign, and the letterboard display I tried to clean it.
So you
Things
can't,
that-
it's
so
not,
that portion would have
that
to be
needs to be
replaced
done.
anyway.
Okay,
And it's 40 years old.
okay. Well, I think we need to discuss this further, but go ahead, Craig.
Just one comment, I guess, if you do not replace the current sign at 24,000, just do the electrical board, like we originally proposed, right?
Mhm.
We can still bring that in the $40,000, I would think, right? We just don't upgrade the upper sign portion, right?
And option one, the entire sign does fit the budget, I believe.
Yeah, but he
But
said
you don't
But it's
get
not
the,
electric.
don't do
you
the
don't get the
sign.
electric,
and
you
do
do
the
Just
the-
that's right, don't do
Electrical.
the sign and do the electric, and maybe not go to the top of the line electric, but look at these other companies.
Just do
Or even this.
Basically replace the changer board
Yeah.
part with the electric
That's
sign.
what I don't think.
It will be vintage.
Well, you know, no,
Very in right now, a lot of vintage. I wonder sometimes, like, will I wear another pair of bell bottoms before I die? I don't know. I just want to make a comment, especially in light of the fiscal considerations and concerns that we're bringing up. And I do realize and understand that there's already been a motion in the closure on this, but I don't think in good conscience I can necessarily feel good about leaving this without kind of bringing up to mind the increase in the cost of the school meals. Just in consideration of like, that's increasing in likelihood because much in the world has increased in its price, and that is affecting the families. And I appreciate that in the email, it did list that almost half of children enrolled in the schools access already the free and reduced lunch program. But it does not indicate how many families would fall to the cliff effect, because that increase does not fall in lockstep with the income eligibility requirements for the free and reduced lunch program. It also doesn't acknowledge the rigmarole schools and staff do every year in order to get families to complete those applications, which is onerous. And it just came to mind, like thinking about being excited about electronic signboards and wanting to use a sign to boost school morale, but it just also makes me wonder, like, how many families would wonder whether or not, like, it's fair that there's like such this high end sign going up when maybe like their own budgets are being squeezed.
We can leave the sign as is, as long, if people are comfortable with it. I mean, there's nothing that needs to change about it, other than it does look, really the letter part looks tired. That's I think the most noticeable part of it. But it's fine. I mean,
think that's true. I
we're
think
good
it is-
Yankees. We
I think
we
it
make
is-
do with a lot of things, and we can put it, that $40,000 can get repurposed with your decision somewhere else.
I think that, and I think Craig's point is an interesting one. I think that the thing that makes that sign look 40 years old is the kind of yellowing plastic of that marquee. And if that were the thing to change, I would support that. I mean, I would even make a motion to change the scope of this project to include an electronic sign to replace the marquee.
I think there's still some things that we need to discuss
Okay.
that
Then
a
I'll
lot
rescind
of
that.
people need to hear, and so I think.
There's no rush on the sign.
Can we just table this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to think about some of this and maybe table it for the next meeting.
There's no rush on the sign.
Okay.
I was just wondering can you look into, can you imagine for us between now and the next time we talk about it, leaving that current sign and replacing, just making it electronic marquee, and what that might look like and what it might cost? And I mean, I don't know
We'll
if
take a look.
if that
Yeah,
requires
yeah.
much imagination, but I don't have it right now, so.
Okay, let's move on from the sign.
So can you, James, pull up the agenda, please? Thank you. Give you pointers.
Sarah, do you see what I did?
The pass-through part.
Yeah, the fund balance.
It's a
So the
pass-through.
2022, 2023 fund balance for the athletic infrastructure.
So
It'll go way
it's
down.
attachment 12. I just thought it was easier to talk about it. It's like the second one.
Yeah.
What do we do?
We're on
So
the
if you keep
agenda,
going,
letter C.
I'll keep going.
25.
The next one, next one.
This number 12.
Yep, we're good.
There we go.
Okay, so,
Go down just a tiny bit so we can see the whole.
would you like me to?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please.
So, what I'm asking is for, if the board would consider expanding the scope of that encumbrance to include a few other areas relative to the architectural, support of Norm, or, somebody else potentially, but. So this is what you talked about already tonight, that's the new locker room space. Potentially, the athletic trainer space could go here. It may also be able to go within this space as well, but that would take other spaces away. This space here is our Laker Learning Lab space and our life skills space. It's not a lot of students, and the way that it is broken up, I think we might be able to do something more efficient with the space. The other thing is the life skills program would benefit greatly from having a handicap accessible toilet within the space or easily accessible to the space. There may be an opportunity for that to be shared between that weight room area and this space, these spaces. So an architect's lens would be helpful. The other piece is, this is the main entrance. So you come in, the main entrance. Looking at this chunk of space here, there is a small office. There is then what's a conference room, and within the conference room is a small restroom. It is not at all handicap accessible. And you know, it's, I think it's original construction potentially. So it is very much tucked in that area. I think that this amount of space could potentially be reworked to a handicap accessible bathroom, single restroom from the main hall, and into an office, because we still need the therapy space, and a small conference room. So I think an architect could probably do that in a pretty efficient way. It's not a big project, but it is one that having their expertise would make a plan to build it out much more effective. And then if we can scroll down to the next. So this is the lower level. This is a little over-captured the space. There is a restroom here, which is a staff restroom. It is a single restroom. It is the only bathroom on that floor. This floor would benefit from another restroom, a single restroom, which I think can be accomplished. I say this relatively easily, but I know that that's probably not quite the case, but there is plumbing. There is plumbing to the right. There is a mop sink for a custodial mop sink within a storage space. There's a washer dryer, so capturing maybe a bathroom is not out of the question, and reworking what's left of the space to meet our custodial needs, I think is something that, again, an architect would be able to do. They're not big projects, but they are ones that I think an architect has more of a skill set to bring to the table. And I think we have a fairly, a reasonable rate. Brian did a nice job doing the request for proposals. That it's an hourly rate that we're paying for, that he's directing that time for that work with the architect.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion to expand the current project to include those.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Do we have discussion?
Yeah, we need discussion.
I mean, I would say that it makes sense to look at it, and then we decide whether it's a project that we fund. But right now, we don't know if it would be useful. So I would be supportive of looking at it from the architect.
Do we need an architect, or do we need a general contractor for most of these spaces?
We should have an architect start on these general contractors have.
I mean, that little space right there, you don't think a general contractor could just go in and do?
It's possible, yeah. I mean, I try to do all the work I've been doing with design building with people, but less and less want to do it. So it's what do I say? One way or another, somebody has to design that space to work. So whether it's the contractor or the architect, I think it's going to be similar cost, but the architect, having him do it now, we could have drawings in a 5-year plan, and a 2-year plan, and a 1-year, like we hold those plans. That I couldn't get a contractor to do for us. They want to do the work immediately. So that would be the one benefit I can think of. Having the design so you can discuss it and budget for it.
Go ahead, Don.
And the architect's already on site, the architect's familiar with the broader space. I think this makes sense too.
Nancy, go ahead.
Yeah, what would you estimate an architect?
here.
This seems like relatively simple project for
Is
an
that the
architect.
20,000?
Yeah.
That's the 20,000.
That's what we paid so far to date
Okay, so how,
for this.
okay,
The locker room work we did
All
was
right, so
$20,000.
that was 20,000.
So the rate is $164 an hour or 65.
Unless you're
We
bringing.
can ask for an estimate of what they think for the amount of time
That
it would
would be
be.
good.
The other question I had is if you look at the first page, if you can scroll up to the other one. Where is the current trainer space? It looks like it's the whole gym.
So the current trainers,
I don't
you know what it
understand
is, that we should put an arrow, it's this little spot in here.
Oh gee,
And it has very poor visibility, so it has, it's just poor visibility to observe the work that's taking place.
sure. So, and you're imagining the two classroom spaces?
I think there's potential here.
Yeah.
I think there's some dead space over here. That might be
We
able to
toured
be
that
looked at.
room at one point after one of our meetings, I think.
No, I remember when we were looking at bathrooms, we looked at I just couldn't envision
No,
it.
I feel like I was in that weight room with you more recently, and you were talking about the dead space.
So there's potential that could be the athletic trainer.
At any rate, this seems like a pretty simple design task for and I'm, so we spend this money and then this could sit on the shelf for 10 years if we don't feel like we can afford the project, right? So, do we have any kind of estimate of what the cost of just doing the locker room spaces that we're, but then it leaves the trainer out in the hall or something if we don't
No,
at
Can't
least
do
do
that.
that piece.
I think it makes sense to do the architecture to create the overall plan because they have a mind for people use of space. And to Nancy's point, yeah, maybe we a la carte at that. Why not?
I have a question, Brian. Chris Williams, because he was the only one that did we sent it out for bids and he was the only one, Mary told me, that came back. Is there any way we can send this section out to bid? I know he's normally a very high-end architect. Isn't there other commercial architects that are more reasonably priced per hour? I'm just trying to see if we can.
As I read it, we're not paying Chris, we are paying the gentleman that was here, and the difference is.
He works for Chris.
I understand that, but Chris's rate is measurably higher than.
Well, that's not what they have here on this.
So the rate is
It's 165.
Yeah, but look at the principal architect.
These are pretty small jobs. I
Yeah,
mean, that's,
it's not a
when
big
I think
thing.
about school construction, I'm thinking of, some pretty big firms that I don't think would, take on such a small job. We can certainly put it back out for requests for proposals. We can try, if that's the direction the board wants to go in.
I don't think we need to.
I think, given that there's an architect who's already working in this space,
Right.
to ask another architect to come in and present the possibility of doing something across the gymnasium from the space that's already being proposed, that just seems like it's gonna.
If you wanted to give a limit of hours, that,
Yeah,
up
that might
to
Why-
X number of
Because to
hours.
Gary's
Why
point,
don't we
it's
go
not
back,
much
have you already talked to him
space.
about this?
We kind of kept,
And I-
we were trying to not get ahead of ourselves, so we can ask
Would
him
it
for
be
an
fair
estimate.
just to ask him what he just
Estimate.
ballpark figure, so
That
we
would be.
have an idea?
Looking at the hours that he spent on the gymnasium, locker room portion, I would just say, it's gonna take him, I would estimate another 40 to 60 hours to wrap all these up in a nice plan.
What is
Because you gotta come to just to verify field verification and stuff, takes him an hour or two, meet in the evening and he goes back and draws it up, and I would say it'd be something around that,
We can confirm that with him. There's no rush to do
There's
this.
no rush.
So
Yeah,
about
just-
another 10,000-11,000 bucks, round figures.
Well, if the whole locker room costs 20, it should be less than that. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean,
We're
these are
just
small
imagining
areas,
that.
to Craig's point.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that seems like a lot. But anyway, let's revisit
We'll
that.
bring back more information
Yeah.
next month, not next month.
So
In a
there's
couple
a
weeks.
motion on the
There's a
table, right?
motion.
So we have to vote on that motion.
We don't have to
Modify
vote,
it.
we can,
I can table that.
can you take your motion?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Correspondence, superintendent,
What did you do?
board secretary, board members, any correspondence? Okay, superintendent, assistant superintendent report, enrollment.
You have the enrollment report in your packet?
13.
The updated enrollment report?
Yes.
Updated. Okay. We already closed public comments. We're gonna go to announcements and then we're gonna move back into non-public. So the announcements, Thursday, May 11th, Interlake School Board Policy Review Committee at the Humiston Conference Room. The Policy Review Committee will meet at 5:30 PM. Tuesday, May 23rd, Interlake School Board at Humiston Building Conference Room. Interlake School Board regular meeting will be at 6 PM. Tuesday, June 6th, Interlake School Board at the Humiston Building Conference Room. Interlake School Board regular meeting will be at 6 PM. So, I guess we are done with the public
So you're
session.
going into
So
non-public?
we're gonna be going into non-public based on, hold on, RSA, I gotta find
Are
it.
we just going back into what we recessed from, so we've already cited the citation?
Do I have to cite it again?